Greetings, welcome back. In the last mini lecture, I left you with this notion of the organic view of the state that we see with Aristotle. There are others later who believe in this organic view of the state. If you study fascism, for example, they believed in that notion of an organic state. One of the things that was a theme of the last mini lecture is that Aristotle takes a much more pragmatic, scientific approach. I told you he's a comparativist in studying knowledge. Uh, Aristotle also disagreed with his former teacher, Plato. Aristotle claiming that knowledge comes from experience. Remember, Plato had suggested that man was born with knowledge, so you may want to put some stars there and knowing the compare and contrast between Plato and Aristotle. I want to spend a bit more time on the seventh point that we make with Aristotle under that theory of mixed constitutions, because this has significant influence on our founding fathers. So there is this notion of that's called economic determinism. If you study Karl Marx, for example, you see that in a radical direction. James Madison, the father of our Constitution, in a conservative, believed in this notion of economic determinism. And Aristotle was the first to assert this notion of economic determinism. And I didn't use that term in your notes, but the idea that a state's economic system serves as the foundation for a state's political system is this notion of economic determinism. Even the United Nations uh, came out with a study, in essence, saying that there is an economic prerequisite for stable democracy. The economic threshold of the United Nations is not very high, about $8,000 a year per capita. And there is a notable exception to this prerequisite, and that would be the world's most populous democracy, India, where the standard of living is less than that, and yet India has had a stable democratic system for quite some time. Aristotle made the claim, the argument, that a democracy requires a strong middle class to balance the interests of the wealthy and the poor. He also believed that the middle class were the most inclined to reason. And I bring this up because today, in 2020, the United States has the most income and the most wealth inequality of any modern democracy in the world. It may or may not be a bad thing. It is a fact. Whether it's good or bad is open to discussion and debate. Certainly, if Aristotle were taking a look at the United States today, Aristotle would say there are some troubling trends in the United States. The fact that for the last 40 or 50 years, income and wealth inequality have grown greater and greater and greater. There is a thin crust at the top doing better and better, and there is a large underclass doing worse and worse, and the middle class is being squeezed. So intriguing, this notion that there is a linkage between economics and politics. And I know you have this in your notes, but I want you to read about it. Remember, this man is writing approximately 2,500 years ago. And I think that he has something to say to us in 2020. You can either follow along or just listen. The best political community is formed by citizens of the middle class, and those states are likely to be well administered in which the middle class is large, in which the citizens have moderate and sufficient property. For where some possess much and others nothing, there may arise an extreme democracy, or a pure oligarchy, or a tyranny may develop out of either extreme. Democracies are safer and they are more permanent than oligarchies because they have a middle class which is more numerous and has a greater share in government. For when there is no middle class and the poor exceed in number, troubles arise, and the state soon comes to an end. And of course, this is a criticism that we have heard from the left. I think you could also make this argument from the right if you are a conservative, right? If you are from the left, you are concerned that there is greater and greater inequality. And if equality is your primary political goal, this is going to bother you a lot. But if you're a conservative and order is your primary political value, this may concern you as well. Because if you have an extreme number of people living in poverty, lawlessness will increase, criminal behavior will increase, and that creates tremendous governmental and societal instability and potential societal anarchy. So whether you are a conservative or a liberal, Aristotle has a warning for both of you. Now, Aristotle goes on to say some things that I think we would take for granted, right? The measure of the goodness or justness of the state is its capacity to serve the general interest. It is bad or unjust if it only serves the interests of the rulers. There are no perfect men. We are all flawed creatures, and therefore there are no philosopher kings. That no matter how hard you would try to create that perfect ruler, you would not get them. And certainly, if you take a look at some of our presidents with the highest IQs, for example, I still believe in my lifetime Jimmy Carter has the highest IQ of any president in my lifetime. But no one would rank Jimmy Carter as the greatest president of my lifetime. A lot of people would probably rank him as the greatest ex-president because the amount of humanitarian work that this man has done is truly inspirational. According to Aristotle, rule by one is either a monarch or a tyrant, depending on whether they seek justice or self-interest. And of course, you know the saying that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Rule by a few is either an aristocracy or an oligarchy, and rule by many is either a polity or a democracy. And think about American government. With American government, we have rule by the one, that's the president. We have rule by the few, that's the Supreme Court. And we have rule by the many, the 535 members of Congress, 435 in the House and 100 in the Senate. And so the United States has created a mixing of democracy and oligarchy. Aristotle claims that the best government in the real world was a polity in which you have all three of these elements. And certainly your textbook makes an excellent observation. I think your textbook authors are absolutely correct. That in this particular case, you do see the influence of Aristotle on our constitutional system through the creation of the president, the Supreme Court, and the Congress. Notice that Aristotle tries to take into account the two contending forces in society, quality and quantity. Quality is what Plato was concerned about: birth, social position, education, knowledge, and the prerequisites of leadership. Quantity is what Pericles was most concerned about: the claims of the masses of the people, the democratic force, as Pericles often called it. Aristotle claims that a state that is dominated by only quality or only quantity is problematic, that either would be a bad and selfish state. And so for Aristotle, the best that we can hope to achieve in the real world, not in a theoretical world, not a world in the mind, but a world that exists in reality, it is the polity. The polity represents the principle of the mean. The polity represents the moderate state. Every state has its rich people, its poor, and its middle class. Aristotle claimed the rich know only to command, and the poor only know obedience. And so you have a mixed state. And I love the quote, and that's why it's in a box in your notes. Both oligarchy and democracy may be tolerable forms of government, even though they deviate from the ideal, which is, remember, the polity. But if you push either of them further still in the direction to which it tends, you begin to make it a worse constitution. And you may end up by turning it into something which is not a constitution at all. You go too far in the realm of majority rule, you risk tyranny. You go too far in the realm of minority rights, you risk anarchy. You put too much power in the hands of a particular social class, again, you risk societal instability. So when Aristotle looks out at political societies, he sees the Constitution different than you and I. Right? For you and I, the Constitution is the highest law of the land. It's the basic law of the country. It determines governmental structure. It says who can do what to whom, under what circumstances. It is the Supreme Court that determines in our society where the power of government ends and where the liberty of the individual begins. But when we take a look at our Constitution, we see it as a legalistic document. It is the law, the highest law, but still only the law. For Aristotle, this notion of constitutionalism is a more embracing concept. It is not just a stale document of, in our case, separation of powers, checks and balances, federalism, bicameralism, and republicanism. Those are the 5 major ways that power is fragmented in our Constitution, and I will talk about that in the second section of this course. But when Aristotle looks at the Constitution, it is a reflection of the way of life for citizens. Because remember that for Aristotle and the ancient Greeks, the only way in which we become fully human is through political activity. It is through participating in governmental affairs. It is in developing reason and debate. So the state defines human character and existence. We disagree with that. In the next section, when we get into the modern theorists, we're going to see the state is utilitarian, as an instrument to serve us. Instead of being as concerned with moral justice and morality like most of the ancient Greek theorists, power is going to become the central concept in chapter 3. And we will move into more modern theorists, Machiavelli, Hobbes, and Locke, in the next section. Have a wonderful day, everyone. You'll be seeing me soon. I won't be seeing you. I'm just looking at myself. Take care. Bye bye.